So today we have started the talk with an important ceremony, which is the basis of our subject today. The subject is what I mentioned earlier, what is called eschatology, is about life after death. The life after death. Life after death is in Buddhism about karma and rebirth. This topic about karma and rebirth has been discussed by many writers and speakers about Buddhism, and it seems to be of great interest for Buddhists. And we mentioned last time something about this, at least part of it, which is we discussed the cosmology. Cosmology is about the world, the universe, and the different types of worlds we discussed. But today we are going to talk about what happens after death. So this is of great importance, I suppose, in all religions, what happens after death. And when we think about what happens after death, we have already mentioned that there is this thing called rebirth. When we speak about rebirth, there is a kind of confusion because of words that are being used. Now, some people use the word reincarnation. Some call it transmigration. Now, these words have different meanings. So it's not correct to use the word reincarnation when we refer to the Buddhist concept. Now, in discussing this, there is another word that is used, especially in Christianity: resurrection. Now, this word resurrection means the bringing to life of a dead body. Now, the Christians believe that Jesus Christ, when he was crucified and he died and he came back to life, the body comes back to life. And we also hear that at the end of the world, all those people who died come back to life on the judgment day. And Jesus will also come and select the good people to be taken to heaven, and all the bad people will be thrown into hell. That body coming back to life is resurrection. So we cannot use that word resurrection when we refer to the Buddhist way of thinking. Then this other word, reincarnation, is also important to understand. When we use the word incarnation, what it means is a soul enters a body. That's the meaning of incarnation. A soul is incarnated, means it has entered a body. So, every birth from a Judeo-Christian standpoint is an incarnation. God creates the body and puts a soul into it. That is incarnation. And when they speak of death, that is called a discarnation, which means the soul separates from the body. That's a discarnation. And they speak of discarnate spirits. That means the soul is there without a body. That is what is called a discarnate spirit. So when they hear of Buddhists talking about rebirth, they think that discarnate spirit re-enters a body, which is reincarnation. This is why that word reincarnation has been used. But that is not the meaning of rebirth. That is not the Buddhist way of thinking. Now those who believe in reincarnation, they still believe in a soul, and they also believe that only human beings have souls, animals don't have souls. And therefore, a human being can never be reincarnated as an animal. And they also believe that every reincarnation is a purification of the soul. So those who believe in reincarnation are not all Christians, but some of the Christians, or maybe Jewish people also, maybe, I don't know. But somehow those who believe in reincarnation, they also think that God, instead of judging people through one life, He has allowed several lives, so that every time a person is reincarnated, that person is, the soul becomes purified. And through a process of several reincarnations, the soul gets more and more pure, and ultimately it is completely purified and it is taken to heaven. So in other words, the human life is seen as a kind of purgatory, which means your sins are being purged. So the human life becomes a purgatory. Now, there is another word that is used, which is what I just mentioned earlier, transmigration. Now, transmigration also assumes that there is a soul that migrates from life to life. But this concept is more a Hindu concept. It's not a Judeo-Christian concept. That means the soul goes from life to life, and this transmigration can happen even in the animal world, which means the human being can be reborn as an transmigrated as an animal, and an animal can become a human being, or a human being can also transmigrate to a heavenly sphere, or maybe even the hells. That's the Hindu belief. But still, it happens through a soul transmigrating. Now the Buddhist concept is different. It's what is called rebirth. And this word rebirth is similar to the word reproduction. Now when we speak of reproduction, there are different kinds of reproduction. Not only biological reproduction. Biological reproduction is where the parents give birth to a child. That is the reproduction. But that's not the only reproduction. If I have a letter to be copied, I put it into a copying machine and I get the reproduction of that letter. Or I can send a fax. That is also reproduction of that letter. Or I can speak to the microphone and get it recorded in a tape recorder. That is also reproduction. Or I can send my voice through radio or television, where a picture is reproduced. Or I take a picture with a camera, and there again the picture is reproduced in the camera. So that is reproduction. And when we talk about reproduction, we don't talk about the soul. We don't believe that something goes into the camera from my body, although there will be a picture. It happens due to a process which we may call cause and effect, a series of causes and effects. If I explain how my voice comes to your ears and how you hear the sound, that's not because something goes from my mouth to your ears. It's simply my vocal cords begin to vibrate, and when the vocal cords vibrate, the air begins to vibrate, and when the air vibrates, what is called the tympanic membrane in your ears begin to vibrate, and that vibration will lead to a nerve impulse going through the auditory nerve into the brain, and an activity takes place in the brain and you hear the sound. That's how it works. So in a very similar way, when it goes into the tape recorder, in a very similar way, the microphone, the diaphragm in the microphone begins to vibrate, and that produces an electric current to vibrate, and then the tape, certain magnetic change takes place in the tape, and then when you play back again, that will lead to a current vibration, and that leads to a vibration in the speaker, the diaphragm in the speaker, and that produces a vibration in the air, and that again goes to your ears and you hear it in that same way. So you see, a series of events takes place. A series of vibrations or changes take place. So it is in a very similar way that rebirth takes place. That's the important thing to understand. So rebirth doesn't mean that a person here goes to the other world. That's not what it means. Even to talk about a person is not correct. If I sing a song and I use the word song to refer to what I am singing, there is no such thing as a song. There is actually only a vibration of the vocal cords. So in a similar way, when we speak about a person, what are we talking about? It is simply the activity of the body. And when we speak about the mind, we are also speaking about the activity of the brain and the nervous system. That is all there is. So how does this rebirth take place? It depends on what we call the emotions. It's the emotion that is called karma. The Buddha used the word chetana. Chetana, some people translate it as volition. Chetana is not volition. Chetana is the emotion. Volition is necessary only when the idea of punishment and reward comes in to find out whether you are guilty or not. That is the wrong way of looking at it. This has nothing to do with guilt, and it's not a punishment or reward. It is simply, if you begin to live with bad emotions, that bad emotion at the moment of death, if you die with bad emotions in the form of anger or worries or fears or passion or whatever, that emotion will start what is called an electromagnetic wave. Just as a current flows through space in the form of a radiation, and like say light coming from the sun is an electromagnetic wave. What we call light is simply an electromagnetic wave. So in a similar way, the radio wave is an electromagnetic wave. And in a similar way, this emotion will produce a wave with a certain frequency. And according to that frequency or wavelength, it will be received in a good place or a bad place. That's how it works. And where you are received is it's like a radio or TV tuned to a certain frequency. And so it will receive that frequency. Now if you assume that high frequency waves are received in bad places and the low frequency waves are received in good places, then that means when our emotions are excited, they are very high frequency. when we calm the calm mind is low frequency. So when the mind is calm, when you die, you are born in a good place. And when the mind is excited with emotion, agitated, then the high frequency waves will be received in bad places. So it could be heavens, it could be hells, or it could be some other spirit worlds, or it could be animal world, or the human world. Wherever the rebirth takes place, it happens this way. So this is why in Buddhism we don't talk about the soul that goes from one place to another. Rebirth doesn't involve a soul. So we can only talk about our emotional state. What kind of emotion do we live with constantly? That's the important thing. This is why it is always necessary to watch our minds. This is the meaning of meditation, to keep the mind calm, not to react to things emotionally. Even when something happens outside in the world, which is unpleasant to us, we should try not to be disturbed by that. To control emotions is to calm the mind, not to be fighting with the emotions. If we begin to fight with the emotions, we get more excited. So instead of doing that, we should learn to calm the mind, make the mind tranquil. And if we can maintain a tranquil mind throughout, that is the right kind of meditation. Not concentrating the mind. Now most people who meditate, they learn to concentrate the mind. It's not a matter of concentration. It's a matter of relaxing the body and calming the mind. That's the important thing to understand. Now another important thing that we should understand is that our natural tendency is to get emotionally agitated. These are habits that we cultivate from childhood. We learn these habits maybe from our parents or the elders. And it goes from generation to generation. So once we begin to learn this, we could deliberately learn to calm the mind. And that is meditation. So it doesn't come naturally to us. But still, calmness is a natural state of the mind. Getting excited is the unnatural thing. So, if we realize this, then we can learn to stay calm, or at least as calm as much as we can. Once the Buddha took some sand into his nails and asked the disciples, which is greater, the sand in my nails or the sand on the floor, the ground? He said, the sand in your nails is very little compared to sand in the earth. And he said, those human beings who die and are reborn in the bad place is like the sand on this earth. And the human beings who are reborn in good places is like the sand in my nails. So you can see that the natural tendency is for us to get emotionally excited and as a result to get a bad rebirth. So this is why it is very important for not only Buddhists but for everyone to meditate, not only meditate, our normal daily activities should be a kind of behavior where we don't come in conflict with other people. We don't get angry and fight and quarrel. We should always speak to people kindly and help people, make sacrifices. This is the kind of life we should live. That's why the Buddha spoke of three things: dana, sila and bhavana. Dana refers to giving, sharing, caring for others. Sila refers to good behavior, courteous behavior, not only in physical actions but also in words, to speak good words. Meditation alone is not enough. We have to be practicing good behavior. It's only if we practice good behavior that we can meditate properly. Otherwise, if you sit and try to purify your mind, you will find that the mind is agitated and it doesn't settle down. Why? Because your whole life your behavior has been bad. You get angry often, you become greedy, you quarrel with people, and then you go to meditate, it won't work. So before you can meditate, you should be able to live in a calm way. All good thoughts make you calm. The good thoughts are thoughts of love, compassion, and thoughts of helping others, sharing with others, caring for others. All these are good thoughts. Now love, the word love of course can be misleading also. There is that book written by Erich Fromm, a psychologist, who wrote a book called The Art of Loving. There he distinguishes between three kinds of love. This English word love is confusing. There is love which is sexual relationships, is also called love. But he points out that is not true love. And there is that he used 3 Greek words referring to the sexual love. He used the word eros. Eros is not the true love. And then there is what is called family love, which is love between parents and children, or love between brothers and sisters, and maybe friends and relatives. That kind of love is he called philia. But that is also kind of attachment and therefore self-centered. But true love he called agape, which is selfless love, a selfless interest in the welfare of all beings. This is what in Buddhism is called metta or maitri. Maitri is the Sanskrit word, metta is the Pali word. So these are the good thoughts that we should cultivate. And when we cultivate good thoughts, our mind becomes calm and tranquil. And we also become happy. All unhappiness is self-centered. Anger makes us unhappy. Passion makes us unhappy. Fears, worries, anxieties, all those things are self-centered emotions. The selfless emotion makes us happy. So this is why it is very important to learn to purify the mind. To purify the mind is to free the mind of these self-centered emotions and make the mind tranquil. Purity and tranquility is the same thing. The tranquil mind is the pure mind. So this is the important thing in karma, which is good thoughts, good feelings. And how we feel is the emotional thing. How we feel. And how we feel depends on how we think. Now in Buddhism we have 2 words for this. How we think, or the thinking part, is what is called mano. And the feeling part, or the mood, or the temper, that is called chitta. So when we use the word chitta in Buddhism, some people confuse these 2 words and think it is the same thing. Mano and chitta is the same, but it's not. Chitta refers to the emotional state. Really the emotion is chetana. Chitta is the mood. The mood can be excited or the mood can be calm. So calmness is the purity. And even if we study the physiology of this, you will observe that chitta, even some Greek philosophers earlier thought the mind was in the heart. But actually, the heart has to do with the emotions, which is the not the heart in the form of the heart muscle, but it is the blood. The blood becomes polluted when you become angry, or if you are sexually excited, certain hormones are secreted into the blood, and that hormone is carried to various parts of the body, and then there are changes taking place in the body as a result. And if that change continues for a long time, you can even become sick as a result. So the normal state of the body is also when the blood is free of these hormones, the pure blood. So the pure heart means the pure blood. And only when the blood is purified that we become healthy and happy. So meditation is very good because of this. Meditation can make us healthy, happy, and also it becomes good karma, so that it will have good effects. And karma can have good effects not only in the next life, it can have good effects in this life itself. So this is why it is so important to purify the mind and to think good thoughts. And our thinking also must be purified. Thinking means the thinking part, which is the brain, not the heart. The thinking is purified means we must have a good philosophy of life. We should have a good way of looking at others, our relationships, how we think about others, how we think about society, how we think about the purpose of life, what kind of life are we leading. The thinking is very important, and that is what will influence our emotions. Our emotions depend on the way we think. This is why the Buddha spoke of what is called the Noble Eightfold Path, where the first thing is the right thinking, right understanding. That right thinking is necessary before we can have the right feelings. And it is the right feelings that will lead to the right speech and the right action. So everything begins with the right thinking. So this is why just sitting and concentrating on your breath is not enough. You have to be understanding properly the life, the meaning of life, the purpose of life. So this is why it is important to listen to talks and also discuss and read books. This is what will help us to improve our philosophy of life. So, according to the kind of emotions we live with, if we live with good emotions, then we can have good rebirth. And in Buddhism we have the idea of heavens, not the same heaven as the Christian heaven, but it's a heaven. It's another world where there is only pleasure, which we discussed last time. And there are the heavens which are higher than the pleasure worlds, where you get peace of mind and happiness, but not the pleasant sensation as such, because you have given up the desire for pleasant sensation. And instead of that, you have purified your mind, and that purity of mind brings happiness, which is superior to simply stimulating the senses. And that is what you call the form worlds. And then you get the formless worlds. And even if you go to the highest world, you are reborn in the highest, best world, still there is death. And it is possible for you to be reborn in the bad places once you have finished. It's like if you have earned a lot of money, you might take a tour around the world and go to very expensive hotels and maybe enjoying a luxurious life. But when all your money has been spent, you will be thrown out of those buildings and you will be on the road like a beggar. So this is why even if you go to these best worlds, you can still die and be reborn in the bad places. So it is very important to come out of this process of rebirth. This continuous process of rebirth is what is called samsara. Samsara is this continuous process or cycle of rebirth. And it is only by getting out of that that you gain freedom from all sufferings. But in order to do that, it is necessary to change your way of thinking. It is only by changing your way of thinking that we can be free of samsara. Now, how we change our way of thinking, we'll discuss next time. So for today, we'll end here, and if you have any questions, I can try to answer them.
Is rebirth determined by the quality of your feelings and thoughts in this life, or just the feeling at the moment of death, or the feelings at the moment of death?
Well, the rebirth depends on that moment of death. But you cannot get a good thought at the moment of death if you have been living a bad life throughout. That's the important thing. That last moment. So it can happen the other way also. If you have been living a good life and at the moment of death you get a bad thought, you are born in a bad place, but very short one, and then again you are reborn in a good place. It depends on the strength of your habitual way of thinking. Yeah.
I have a great deal of questions. I'll try to confine it to just two. One of them, just to clarify, to see if I'm understanding it properly, you use the analogy of a fax machine for rebirth. So would that then mean that the thing that I think is me, that I call as me, is really just a process that was the eventuality of another being that died and passed on this information, if you will, like in the example of a fax machine, to produce the eventuality of me. Is that right?
Well, it's like that, yeah. That the reality of your own existence is not really an existence. It's simply an activity. So an activity doesn't really exist. Like a wave, it just comes and goes. Every activity, even my shaking of hands like this, is an activity which doesn't exist. So when we talk about existence, we are talking about something that remains in time. But an activity doesn't remain in time.
So the conditions that were, one of the conditions that were necessary to present the being of me was the death of another being, which provided the necessary conditions to produce me, or the wave of me.
Well, yeah, it's not a me at all, so it's not a being. So this is
the process.
It's a continuation of a process. Yeah.
And then the other question that I had is that in order for the Buddha to be born in the human realm before he became a Buddha, when he was Siddhartha, that would have been determined by the death of the prior. That would have been his rebirth.
Yeah.
So so then it's not necessary to be born in these higher, like sequentially higher realms in order to attain, because then the Buddha would have had to have been born in those other realms in order to attain. Is that correct?
Yeah, that doesn't matter. What is important is simply your thoughts. That's the important thing.
So, I'm good just to be good. I'm not good or calm to be reincarnated in a rebirth, reborn in a calm, in a good state. I'm just calm to the fact of being calm. That is, I'm not attached to the results of myself being calm. Can you comment on that?
I didn't understand
I
your
don't want
point properly.
that, in other words, that I would try to live a tranquil life in order that my next life would be very good.
Yeah.
That seems to be manipulated to me. If I just live a tranquil life just to be tranquil, that seems to be less egotistical, more sincere, right, in actually wanting to be a calm and good person. Not being calm and good because I'll have a better life when I get reborn.
Well,
Making that clear.
yeah, I understand what you're saying. There are these two ways of doing this. What you mentioned. One is doing it like business, like an investment, or you save money to put in the bank so that when you are retired you can use that money, or you earn money in order to enjoy pleasures. Now, that type of karma is what most people do. That means next life I can be happy if I purify my mind now. Now, if you do it with that motive, you might be able to gain something, but that is not the best. The right way to do it is to purify the mind for just the sake of purifying the mind, because the pure mind is a good state of mind. And you are trying to be good, you are not trying to gain something. So that is the proper way to do it. That's important to know, because these are two ways of doing it which the Buddha mentioned. One is what is called the Putujjana. The Putujjana is the ordinary person who has not understood the Dhamma properly, and he'll be doing things in this way, in that punishment reward way. But the Arya Savaka, the Arya method, is to do it without that kind of motive, where you are doing it because it is good to do. That's the right way. Yeah.
What is considered a bad rebirth? Being born poor, being born crippled?
Yeah. Bad rebirth can be in the form of being poor, or it can be being blind or deaf and dumb or lame, crippled, in so many ways. You can be born in so many bad ways. That is a bad rebirth. Any kind of rebirth that makes you unhappy, that's a bad rebirth.
I have a question. By calming the mind, what I hear you saying is that the senses that are senses that are stimulated by external conditions that create either desire or discomfort are calmed, so that we do not experience unhappiness, because unhappiness is the desire for something, the craving for something, or the urge, I think is the word you used a few weeks ago, or the revulsion from it. But my question is, because we are biological continuums of a system, naturally when I'm hungry, my body, as an example, my body is going to desire sustenance to keep me living. Now, what about those, aren't there some desires, I guess, that will never go away?
Desires don't go away automatically, because every time you produce a desire, it turns into a habit. The more you repeat that, through repetition, it becomes stronger and stronger. So in a similar way, it is possible to get rid of desires by consciously stopping. You see, our desire is actually an unconscious thing. When you become angry, you don't think, I must become angry and then become angry. It just happens to you. You are not conscious of it. A desire also is like that. When you fall in love, it just happens. You are not thinking, I must fall in love and then do it. So, nothing is done consciously in this way. But, when you stop it, the stopping has to be done consciously.
So, if I understand you correctly, by calming the mind, it's sort of, and I've heard you say it's not a repression, but more of an awareness and a behavior modification, so where our behaviors don't impact negatively other people.
Yeah.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So it's consciously done, and by becoming conscious, that unconscious process stops the moment you become conscious of it. That's another important thing to understand. You don't have to suppress or repress or any of those things. The moment you become conscious of your desire, the desire stops. But the problem is with emotions, it's more like your hot plate. You turn the switch off, the heat doesn't disappear at once. But the light, you turn the switch off, the light disappears at once. But heat doesn't disappear like that. So in a similar way, the emotional excitement was produced due to hormones being secreted into the blood. And the moment you change your thought or become conscious of your thought, the hormone doesn't disappear. It takes time. So this is why when you are angry, you become aware of the anger stops, but it's a physical thing now. Anger is not just a mental thing. A physical change has taken place. So you have to watch and stay calm till it gradually disappears.
Yeah, my question has to do with rebirth. If I understand it correctly, the spirit, there's a spirit that goes into a body, and that the spirit uses the body to purify the mind as a vehicle.
Well, that idea of spirit is not a Buddhist concept.
Okay.
That spirit is the same thing as the soul. So we don't think in terms of a spirit entering a body. That's not what it is.
So what is reborn?
There is no what that is that dies or is reborn. It's like your song going into the tape recorder. Although you use the word song, there is no such thing as a song there. And nothing has gone into the tape recorder really. And what comes out, you call a song again, but nothing has really come out. It's like that. You have to understand it like that.
So what do you call it, like an existence?
Huh?
What do you call it, like an existence or a being? Or
It's not an existence or a being, it's an activity. So, it's not an entity, it's an activity. This is the way we have to understand. When we speak about an entity, we are talking about something there. But there is no entity there, there is only an activity.
So the activity is using the body as a vehicle. I don't know, I mean...
No. Nothing, activities can't do it. Body is active, that's all. There is no activity doing a job. Activity cannot do jobs. Only thing is, one activity can lead to another activity. That's how it goes. One activity leads, if you have a row of marbles, you tap the first marble, it will go and strike the second, and that will go and strike the third, and so on. So one activity leads to the other activity. So there is no real entity doing anything. Yeah.
If an individual lives an exemplary life, one that you would characterize as being in a state of goodness. If
I
that,
didn't hear you properly. Can you say it slowly, please?
yes. If an individual lives a good life
Yeah.
and interacts with people around him or her, then that individual will have an effect on other individuals.
Yeah.
What is now this is activity again, I think in the same sense as you described it, Now, as people around that individual become affected for the good, what is being transmitted here? Is this a bit like having rebirth of oneself in another simply by one's own goodness?
Well, the point is you are using words that refer to entities like individual, and you are talking about how one individual's actions will affect another individual. The word individual there refers to an entity. But if you think in terms of activities, then that doesn't come out that way. Because an activity, when you say one individual does something, it's simply an activity. And that activity leading to similar activity or an effect in the other place. So it's simply activity leading to another activity, like the marbles. One marble shaking and shaking the other marble. It's like that. One activity leading to another activity.
But there has been change.
Huh?
There has been change as a result of one activity creating another.
Well, the word change is also a little misleading, because the moment we speak of a change, we are talking about the change of an entity. So, if we are thinking only in terms of activities, we can't speak about changes. Only one activity leading to another activity. The moment we speak of a change, we are speaking of the changing of an entity. You see? What's that?
If you consider cause and effect, one activity leading to another,
Yeah.
cause and effect are related by change.
Well, another word you are using, cause and effect. You see, this cause and effect is also associated with this idea of entity. This is something that was dealt with by Hume, a philosopher. He said there is no such thing as cause and effect. The moment we speak of a cause and an effect, we are assuming that the effect is already in the cause. There are no causes and effects. There are only events, the presence of certain events or conditions produce some other thing. For example, he used an analogy to explain it. If you take a hammer and strike on a glass, and the glass breaks, so people might say the striking of the hammer was the cause and the breaking of the glass was the effect. He says that is not correct. There were several conditions necessary for the glass to break. One was the hammer striking. But if the hammer was brought very slowly to the glass won't break. So the speed of the hammer was important. And the glass is something that breaks, it's breakable. Now if it was a piece of iron or something, it won't break. So the breakability of the glass itself was also a condition necessary for the breaking of them. So there are several conditions like that necessary for something to happen. So you cannot speak about a cause and an effect. We can only talk about conditions, necessary. We can talk about necessary conditions or essential conditions. Now when we talk about conditions, they also speak about necessary or essential conditions and what's that? A condition that could be necessary or could not be necessary. Like say we speak about the road being wet. Now the road becoming wet can happen due to various conditions. You can't say rain was the necessary condition for the road to be wet. Rain is not a necessary condition, but it is a condition that could wet the road. You can wet the road by throwing some water on the road also, and that is not rain. So this is why we can speak about necessary conditions and sufficient conditions. That's the other word. A sufficient condition and a necessary condition or an essential condition. So we have to think along those lines, then you begin to understand there are no causes and effects also. Any other questions?
I'm just confused.
Confused.
I'm confused. If the activity of our thoughts and feelings determine our rebirth, isn't that not a cause and an effect? It's the effect of our...
Normally
Maybe it's semantics, but...
well, normally we use that word cause, but it is not really correct.
But we are the agents of that rebirth. We are the cause of that rebirth.
Well,
The quality of our
these are
actions,
these are two ways of thinking that the Buddha used. One is called conventional truth, and the other is what is called the ultimate truth. So conventional truth, of course, we speak like that and that is okay. But when we speak about the ultimate truth, then it is not okay.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Because it's the truth because the whole society is assuming that that is the truth. Because this is the convention, we always use words like that.
Okay.
But in actual fact, you don't exist there to do anything. So you are saying, I exist here and do some karma and then I get results. But that is incorrect. If you don't exist, how can you be doing karma? And how can you be getting results? You understand? Yeah.
So, if I understand it correctly, in essence then, the illusion of self is nothing more than the activity, a byproduct of the activity of the five aggregates. Is that right? Just an energy flux that occurs.
Well, this use of five aggregates is also a dangerous thing.
Atomic energy, just this flux.
Well, there is also a notion that the human being is made up of five aggregates. That's not correct. No. What I call five aggregates is an analysis of experience. That's the important thing. Well, we'll be discussing this next time. So I don't have to waste time on that. Next time you remember to ask that question again. Because I'll be explaining the five aggregates. So when you begin to understand the five aggregates, then you begin to understand that it is incorrect to say that, but I know several books, some writers try to put it that way. But that's not correct. Because five aggregates is not the constituents of a personality. That's not correct.
Process.
No, it's an analysis of what is called experience. Now, you have to understand what I mean by experience. Now, experience means seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. That is what we call experience. So, that experience has been analyzed. Now, when we talk about experience, we also think about a subject and an object. The subject is the person who does the experiencing, and the object is what has been experienced. Right? So when we speak about experience, we speak about a subject and an object, and a relationship between the subject and the object. That is an experience. So, that whole thing is a wrong assumption. There is really no subject, there is no object, there is only experience. That's what we have to understand. We'll discuss that next time.
Can you comment on this statement?
What's that?
Can you comment on this statement that every outer action has a mental equivalent?
I didn't understand that. Can you say?
That everything I think
Yeah.
has some outward effect. Everything that happens to me is a result of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, what about Hume? You said that Hume said,
Well,
This is not-
it is correct only from that conventional way of thinking. Your statement becomes correct from that conventional way of thinking, not in the ultimate way. Because thinking itself is an activity. So whenever you talk about an effect, again you are talking about another activity, which means one activity led to another activity. That's all that happened.
Would it be safe to say that we perform activities, the activities lead to other activities which might be a rebirth, which would also contain suffering?
Yeah.
Somehow.
The suffering is a different thing. You see. Suffering is actually your emotions being frustrated. That's the meaning of suffering. The emotion and whatever is happening is in conflict. Say the emotion wants to be young all the time, but you begin to grow old. So the growing old and the emotional desire are in conflict. That conflict is the suffering. So we are all the time, we are talking about these are two ways of thinking. So these two ways of thinking all the time come in conflict. This is the problem. So there is this normal, ordinary or conventional way of thinking and speaking, and there is also the ultimate way of thinking. So when we discuss the teaching of the Buddha, we always come in, these two ways of thinking begins to come in contact. And that's why it's difficult to understand. But if we are able to divide these two ways of thinking and think only in one way, not in the other way. So when we are thinking in an ordinary way, we can think in one way. When we are thinking of the Dhamma in the deeper aspects, then we are thinking in another way.
Can I ask one last question?
Yeah?
I promise one more.
If someone is born blind, a baby's born blind, that is because of someone's activity previously in time. It's not the fault of that little innocent, that little being, that baby. He didn't do, that little baby did not do something 500 years ago to make that person blind, that baby blind. That's just, someone else could have done some activity that was negative karma and it came to affect that little baby.
Yeah. Well, that is also our ordinary conventional way of thinking, you have to understand. The moment you say someone else did it, it's not real someone else there.
All of us.
No, not all. It's
All
not.
the activity.
An activity in the past resulted in an activity in the present.
You said
There is no person doing anything here.
no, but a collective
Negative activity.
No. That collective thinking is also.
Well, what's the
They're
purpose,
not
why
real.
have it other than for its own sake, a good, calm thoughts? If it doesn't, I can't use the word effect, if it has no influence on that baby being born blind.
Well, you are still thinking in terms of entities and not in terms of activities. This is the
But I
problem.
said the general activity of collective good calm.
What is collective? What is collective?
Everybody's activity.
It's not everybody's activity. One individual activity is producing that.
One individual activity produced the blindness in that baby?
Yeah.
Just one bad thought, one
Not only a thought, it's also an action.
bad thought or bad action?
No,
One nasty comment?
one bad thought plus an action.
A thought, one bad thought and one followed by that one bad action
Yeah,
produced the blindness in that baby?
yeah.
Wow, just one?
So you want to get other people also responsible for that. That's what you are trying to do.
I thought
Trying
there
to
was
get
no
it
individual,
collective.
so there was no one, you said no, you got uptight with the
Individual word, so that's why I made it collective.
That's not the meaning of that. Individual, I am not trying to say it's not individual but collective. That's not what I am trying to say. To think of an individual is to think of an entity. But there is no entity, whether collective or individual. There is only an activity instead of an entity. That's the important thing. Yeah?
Doesn't random chance also play a factor in this process of activity? I come into town, I have intention of arriving here safely. I have an accident. Somebody's reborn and there's a genetic glitch in the born.
Well, the whole point is you are thinking in terms of guilt. There is no guilt in Buddhism. And there is no holding any person responsible and worthy of punishment or reward. So, if you begin to think in terms of punishment and reward and guilt, then you get into that confusion. But if you don't think in those terms, now if you do bad driving, if you make a mistake in your driving, and you meet with an accident, that is not a punishment. Punishment is, if the policeman comes and catches you, you will be taken to court. Their judge will determine what kind of punishment you will be given. That is a punishment. All punishments are human-made. But we are not talking about punishments and rewards. We are talking about actions and results of actions. It's simply you make the wrong move in driving and you meet with an accident. It's not a punishment. So it's similar to that.
I think perhaps some of the confusion is around like the blindness of a baby or something is because we perceive those as unpleasant things when...
He said it was a bad.
Well, they're not, they just are. I don't know that it's fair to say that it's a punishment, like that it's because someone 500 years ago did something wrong, that this baby is being punished, but and I think perhaps one of our other breakdowns is that we're perceiving ourselves, you use the analogy of one marble striking another, and we're sort of perceiving ourselves as the marbles, when in fact we're not the marbles at all. We are in fact also the marble striking another marble, striking another marble. So there isn't really any us to be doing things, but rather the process. So I'm not necessarily separated from you. And I think that I'm having a hard time explaining this. It's very complicated. Yeah, so there's not, we are just the breathing and the thinking, and those are that's just the process, and it's through our ignorance that we perceive that as a self, and then suffering and all of that arises as a result of all of those things. But that those are just the consequences. The blind baby or the accident, or those are just the consequences that they are perceived as unpleasant or punishment is as a result of our own attachment. I'll stop it.
Yeah, that's right.
He made it.
You gotta walk through that.
The questions and responses have led me to a conclusion, and that is that virtually all of the questions have the ultimate answer, that when we speak in ultimate truth, there is no confusion, there is no contradiction. So I formed a conclusion. My conclusion is that ultimate truth is inexpressible because it is only experience, because all the words that you can use to convey ultimate truth, they're all words that come out of convention. So therefore there is no correspondence that is possible, but only you're conveying that I may have an experience of the ultimate truth, but I'm not going to get it by listening to you.
Well, the problem is there are some who speak like that. There are some writers who write like that, and there are speakers who speak like that. What is special about a Buddha is his ability to express this ultimate truth. Now this is why we speak of the Buddha as Swakhato. Swakhato means one who is able to say things. Now there are some who say the truth can never be spoken. He who knows does not speak, and he who speaks does not know. That is a Zen saying, but that is not a saying in accordance with the teaching of the Buddha. It may be Zen. So the important thing is that the Buddha has explained this, and if you study the teaching of the Buddha properly, you will be able to express it yourself. using that method that the Buddha used. So this is why it's not only a Buddha, a disciple of the Buddha is also able to convey. Now there are three kinds of Buddhas. It's very important to understand that. One is called a Samma Sambuddha. The other is called Pacceka Buddha. And the other is called Savaka Buddha. What is called a Pacceka Buddha is a person who begins to understand, but he is not able to express what he has understood. He cannot explain. He cannot use words to explain. That's a Pacceka Buddha. What is called a solitary Buddha. That means a Buddha who doesn't have disciples. He is not a teacher. It's like some people who know mathematics and can solve difficult problems, but when he goes to teach, he becomes a failure. He can't teach properly. So it's like that. You might understand certain things, but you may not be able to express it properly. But when it comes to a Samma Sambuddha, he is a person who is able to express, and therefore he is the one who becomes a teacher and who will be able to have followers. That is a Samma Sambuddha. And the other is a disciple Buddha who learns from the Samma Sambuddha. And he can also, by learning how the Buddha uses words and explains, he can also learn to teach others. That's the important thing. So, someone wrote a book called Ineffability. Ineffability means that you cannot convey the truth through words in this way. But that is not the teaching of the Buddha. So if we really begin to understand this, you can understand it and you can explain it. Only thing is not, it may not be so easy. Do you have any more questions? Now you may be tired, huh? Better thing is to go home and reflect on this. Think. The more you think about these things and maybe discuss with others and maybe write it out, then things become clearer. Because when these are new ideas, when it comes into your mind, you won't be able to understand it at once. So you have to keep thinking about it. It's like the cow that eats the grass and then sits somewhere and begins to take it out and chew again. So like that, this kind of knowledge you have to learn and then go home, sit somewhere and then bring it out again and think about it.
Sure could.
Chewing the cud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we will end it here today. So next time we'll be discussing more on this. We are talking about what is called soteriology of Buddhism. Soteriology is the idea of salvation, and that is about nirvana. So we said in order to achieve this we have to change our way of thinking. Today we did a little of that thinking. but we'll be doing more of this kind of thinking, a little different way of thinking from the normal way of thinking. So next time we'll do that.
Next time we'll be talking more about how to change our thinking and our thoughts,
Yeah,
feelings.
yeah. So I'll chant a blessing to bless you, bring you good health, happiness, and prosperity, and everything that is good luck. So keep your palms together. Bhavatu sabba mangalam rakkantu sabba devata sabba buddhanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalam rakkantu sabba devata sabba dhammanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalam rakkantu sabba devata sabba sanghanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te. May you all be well.
Um,